last summer when my girlfriend Emily and I flew down to Savannah, Georgia for a friend's wedding. Every hotel was booked or ridiculously priced, so we looked for an Airbnb near the historic district. Old houses, Spanish moss streets, all that Southern Gothic charm. We found one listed as Victorian home with antique character. The photos showed lace curtains, brass lamps, and a long hallway lined with portraits. It looked like the kind of place that still smelled of candle wax, even when nothing was burning. When we pulled up that Friday evening, the heat was thick enough to taste. The house stood 3 stories tall, white paint peeling in strips, porch swing creaking even though the air was still. Inside, it was beautiful and heavy. Every floorboard side under our weight. Old furniture everywhere, clawfoot chairs, carved cabinets, and in the hallway, a row of paintings of people who looked permanently disapproving. Their eyes seemed to follow you no matter where you stood. The host had left a typed note on the kitchen counter. "Welcome, feel free to explore, but please do not move or touch the antique mirror upstairs." At the bottom, a little smiley face that somehow made it creepier. That first night was normal. Okay, we unpacked, showered, went to dinner, came back around midnight. The house groaned as the temperature dropped. While Emily brushed her teeth, I scrolled through the reviews again. One comment caught my eye. "Amazing stay. Didn't see the attic. Probably for the best." I assumed they meant storage. The second night is when everything changed. We'd just come back from the wedding reception, half drunk and still in dress clothes. Emily couldn't find extra towels, so she opened a narrow door in the upstairs hallway. We thought it was a closet. Instead, there was a short wooden staircase spiraling upward. The top, faint light leaked through the cracks of another door. She looked at me and said, "Maybe that's where the mirror is." The smell hit first, dust, old wood, and something sweet, like faded perfume. When we pushed the attic door open, dust motes floated through a shaft of moonlight. And there it was, a full-length mirror standing directly opposite the stairs. Angled so that when you stepped inside, the first thing you saw was yourself climbing up. Someone had draped a yellowed sheet over it. We knew the note said, "Don't touch it," but curiosity wins when you've had 2 glasses of champagne. The fabric slid off with a dry hiss. The glass looked smoky, not dusty, like it was clouded from within. Our reflections appeared, but the light didn't match. The background behind us in the mirror seemed dimmer, stretched somehow. Then Emily raised her hand to brush hair from her face, and her reflection moved half a second late. It wasn't a glitch. It was deliberate, like the reflection was thinking before copying her. I felt my throat tighten. I said, "Okay, that's enough." And that's when we both saw it, the shape behind us, tall, thin, colorless. It stood between our reflections, not touching, just there. When I spun around, nothing. When I looked back, the thing in the mirror had moved closer. No features, just the outline of shoulders, neck, and a head tilted slightly to the side, like it was studying us. We stumbled down the stairs so fast, I scraped my palm on the banister. I slammed the attic door and dragged a small dresser in front of it. Neither of us spoke. I could hear Emily's breathing and the ticking of a wall clock somewhere below. At 2 a.m., we grabbed our bags and went to the car. We spent the night in the Walmart parking lot 2 miles away with the engine running and the AC blasting, pretending it was because of mosquitoes. At sunrise, I convinced myself it had been reflections, exhaustion, alcohol, anything. We went back just to pack it properly. When I opened the closet door, the staircase was there, but the attic door at the top was gone. Flat wallboards, freshly painted over, nails still silver. No gap, no hinge marks. The mirror was nowhere in the house. I texted the host, "Hey, did you move the mirror in the attic?" He replied within a minute, "Sorry about the noise upstairs. The attic has been sealed for years." I stared at that message until the typing indicator blinked and vanished. I asked for clarification. Nothing. By the time we loaded the car, the listing had already disappeared from Airbnb search. That night, back in our apartment, Emily swore she saw someone standing in the reflection of our TV while it was off. I told her it was just glare from the hallway light. But I didn't turn that light off for a week. A month later, we got an automated email from Airbnb asking us to review our stay. When I clicked the link, it redirected to a blank page that said, "This listing no longer exists." I checked online out of morbid curiosity. That address doesn't appear on Google Maps anymore either. The house is still there physically. Users posted photos, but the number on the mailbox isn't the same. Sometimes, late at night, I catch myself pausing at mirrors longer than I should. I wait for that half-second delay, that breathing pause before the reflection moves. Most of the time, it doesn't, but once, in the bathroom, it did. And I don't own anything antique. So if you ever rent an old house and the host warns you not to touch something, don't. Sometimes it isn't superstition. Sometimes it's containment.
This happened in late 2022, when I rented a cabin on the outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina. I had been working remote for months and just needed 3 quiet nights away from everything. No city noise, no notifications, just trees and silence. The Airbnb photos looked perfect. Cedar walls, a porch facing the woods, even a tiny fireplace. The reviews were all 5 stars, full of phrases like peaceful getaway and perfect isolation. That last part should have been the warning. When I arrived, the host, a man in his 50s named Daniel, met me on the gravel driveway. He was friendly, but his eyes moved too fast, like he was checking for something behind me. While handing over the keys, he pointed down the narrow hallway and said, "You can use every room except the one at the end. It's locked for storage." Then he added, almost as an afterthought, "If you hear any knocking from that door at night, don't worry about it. Old plumbing." He smiled. I laughed back. He didn't. The first night, the rain came heavy. I made dinner, poured a drink, and tried to convince myself the creaks were just an old house stretching far around 1 a.m. 3 slow knocks echoed from the locked door. Not random, rhythmic, deliberate. I froze on the couch, every hair on my arm standing up. When I finally whispered, "Hello," the sound stopped. I walked down the hallway, flashlight in hand. The door handle twitched, just once, then nothing. Next morning, I found faint, muddy footprints, bare, adult-sized, leading from that door toward the kitchen, then vanishing halfway across the floorboards. I stepped outside to find Daniel's truck already gone. That evening, I dragged a chair under the hallway light so I could see the door straight from the living room. Around midnight, I heard whispering, not words, more like air being pushed through a throat. The door shifted against the frame, like something was pressing from inside. I grabbed my phone to record, but before I hit record, the knocks came again. This time from behind me, on the opposite wall. I bolted outside into the cold. The entire cabin went dark. When the power came back a minute later, the door at the end of the hall was wide open. Inside was a small room with nothing but an old twin bed and handprints on the wall, smaller than mine, like a child's. I left before sunrise. When I tried to contact Daniel through Airbnb, the listing was gone. Airbnb support told me the account had been deactivated. No record of the property ID. To this day, I can't sleep when rain hits the roof. The rhythm always sounds like those 3 knocks.
In March 2023, I booked a seaside Airbnb cottage on the coast of Maine for a writing break. The listing pictures showed weather-worn shingles, a rocky shoreline, and a small wooden deck that looked out over fog. It was cheap, $49 a night, which should have been my first red flag. The host's name was Lydia. Her profile photo looked decades old, maybe scanned from film. She messaged that check-in was contact-free because she managed multiple properties and couldn't meet guests in person. That sounded normal enough. When I arrived, the tide was rolling in hard. Wind hissed through the cracks of the porch. Inside, the place smelled of cedar, salt, and something faintly metallic, like wet coins. It was cozy. 1 bedroom, a small kitchen, and a framed cross-stitch that read, "May all who enter find peace." On the nightstand sat a spiral notebook labeled guest log. I flipped it open out of curiosity. The first entry was a cheerful paragraph about lobsters and sunsets. The next page was written in hurried, uneven lines. If you stay past 3 nights, it starts knocking from the basement. The following pages had been torn out. I laughed under my breath, probably a joke. I dropped my bag, made coffee, and spent the first evening writing while gulls screamed outside. When darkness came, the ocean sounded closer than it should have been, as if the water were creeping up the rocks. Night 1, uneventful. The place was cold but peaceful. I slept with the window cracked and dreamed of waves hitting glass. Night 2, at 3 a.m., I woke to the faucet running. The handle was turned fully open, water splashing over a spoon I'd left in the sink. I shut it off and went back to bed, telling myself it was water pressure, nothing more. Night 3. The wind had died completely, yet I heard scraping under the floorboards. Not my chevier, slow, like someone dragging a chair across the underside of the living room. Each scrape was followed by a hollow thump. I stood in the center of the room, listening, trying to match the rhythm. It felt deliberate, like Morse code I didn't understand. I wanted to leave then, but curiosity outvoted fear. The basement door sat behind the kitchen, secured by a rusted latch. When I touched it, the metal was warm. At 4:07 a.m., the knocking started. 3 precise hits. Pause. 3 more. I called out, "Lydia, anyone down there?" Silence, except for the sea breathing outside. By sunrise, I'd decided to pack, but before leaving, I needed to see what was behind that door just once, so the story wouldn't eat me alive later. The latch lifted easily, though it had looked frozen in place. A damp smell rolled up, salt, mildew, and something sour, like spoiled meat. Wooden stairs descended into darkness. Halfway down, My phone flashlight caught something metallic on the floor, a folding chair facing the staircase. On the seat lay a Polaroid photo. I picked it up. It showed the cottage living room exactly as it looked above the same table. Same lamp, but taken from the spot where I was standing. In the far corner of that picture, a long, pale figure was crawling out from behind the couch. I nearly dropped the phone. When I lifted the light again, wet footprints were forming on the concrete near my shoes, bare narrow, too long. The air temperature plummeted. I bolted up the stairs and slammed the door. Outside, dawn had barely begun. Mist rolled off the ocean like smoke. From the yard, I could see the small basement window. The glass was shattered, but the shards lay outside, not in. I drove until I found signal and texted the host. "Someone's been in your basement. You should call the police." She replied 20 minutes later that property shouldn't have been listed. "Please delete any photos you took." Airbnb refunded me automatically 2 days later. When I checked the link again, it said this listing has been removed due to safety concerns. The host profile disappeared soon after. A month later, I received an unmarked envelope in my mailbox. Inside was a single Polaroid, the same angle, same living room. Only this time, the photo showed the front door open and my car visible outside, trunk half packed. The timestamp read the date I left. I turned the picture over. Written in smeared blue ink were 4 words. "You stayed too long." I didn't report it. What would I even say? That an Airbnb sent me mail from the dead? I moved apartments that summer, inland, nowhere near the coast. Still, sometimes at night, when the building settles, I hear the pipes click 3 times, pause, and click 3 more. And every time I think of that torn page in the notebook and wonder if whoever wrote it ever made it to morning. Next time you find a deal that feels too good to be true, remember some places don't rent to make money. They rent to see who's brave enough to stay past the 3rd night.